Hello and welcome to the Wonder Woman podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm your host. Every week, I bring you 2 interviews with a female or non-binary makers of all kinds. And this week's guest is Sophie Glenn. Sophie makes furniture predominantly out of metal, and she does some really cool effects with them where you think that they're wood. So pretty fascinating stuff. It was a great time chatting with Sophie. Before we hop into the episode with her, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Christina B, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Sven, Dwarf Sized Workshop, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Tool Mom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou, Made by Mary Lou, Amy, Bison Valley Carving, Dan and Kelly, Reclaim Living Store, Brandy, Studio, Obey, Kathy, One Girl and Her Tools, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued and ongoing support, helping to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. And with no further ado, here is Sophie Glenn. I always start with having my guests introduce themselves. So when you're ready, I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Okay, well, I'm Sophie Glenn, and I'm currently in Starkville, Mississippi, where I'm teaching. I'm a visiting assistant professor of sculpture here, but I'm originally from New York City. I was born and raised there, and grew up in the middle of Manhattan. My mom worked retail at a fancy clothing store. My dad still works at a bar, but is soon retiring. I went to school at SUNY. My undergrad work was at SUNY Purchase College, which is in Westchester County, New York, so slightly upstate. And I did grad work at San Diego State University, and kind of been hopping around for a little while, and eventually ended up here. So.
All right. So you hit up both coasts.
Yeah.
From both far ends of the country there.
I grew up in New York, and I was there up until I was 23 or 24, I think. And I was just I need to get out and explore a little bit. So going to San Diego is a good excuse to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that a bit of a culture shock, San Diego versus New York?
My mom's family, my mom is from California.
Okay.
So I feel like I kind of had a vibe of it beforehand. There's definitely a slower vibe or slower pace to San Diego. It's we'll just get it done tomorrow. And I'm just no.
Yeah.
Work's gotta get done. I need to do it now.
Yeah.
So that was probably the thing I had to get used to the most. But I had a great time there. I still talk to a bunch of my grad school buddies, and we're still good touch with each other. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I get the whole pace thing. My wife and I lived in northern San Diego County for almost 5 years, so in Oceanside, and it drove me insane coming from Midwest, boom, boom, if you're 10 minutes early, you're late type of mentality.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'd be at work, between 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to go, and hear all these young engineers come sauntering in after surfing all morning at 9:30, and I'm ah!
I feel like the unofficial state motto or town motto of San Diego is mañana, so just tomorrow. Or,
yeah.
No.
Exactly. I wish it would have rubbed off a little bit more on me. I feel like that's probably a healthier way to live life.
Right. Yeah. things about it. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So growing up in the city, like what kind of things, did you do as a kid?
Well, I lived across the street from my elementary school, and there's a little playground there, so we'd go there quite frequently when I was really young, and like go to museums when I was younger too. I actually went to an arts high school, so that was kind of fun. So some of the assignments for that were to go to museums and just like sketch some of the statues, or like sort of recreate or sketch out the paintings that were there. So that was really fun. Something I really miss about being in New York. Um, yeah, I mean, I always have a hard time answering that question sometimes because like people are just like, especially living in the suburbs now, it's just like, wow, what was that like? I was just like, I don't know, it's just a different kind of childhood, I guess. I was
Well,
like living in the suburbs.
right. Well, even though the idea of like the arts high school, like I feel like bigger cities or bigger, metropolitan areas have those kind of opportunities
Yeah, sure.
for high schoolers. Like I can't think of a single art high school in my entire state, and I could be wrong. There may be one somewhere, but
Yeah.
like at least I know like my kids won't have that
Mhm.
opportunity in my local region. So like I, if you don't mind, can you just spend a little time like talking about like what's different about that experience versus
Like being in an arts high school, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah. So it was sort of set up just like regular high school. You have like homeroom in the morning and you go through like your history and your math classes and stuff. But thrown in there too were just art classes. So I think we had, it was like 3 studio art classes a day, or like 3 40-minute periods, or however
Mm-hmm.
long the periods are. And then it would be a drawing class where we take watercolor or sculpture and things like that. So it was really like I was really fortunate to have that experience.
Yeah.
My grades were like, I was doing okay in junior high, but I kind of stopped caring after a while because I kind of figured I'd go into art eventually. I was really fortunate that I had that opportunity to go to that high school because at the time the schools in New York were just sort of, unless you were like super smart and tested into like the good schools, you were kind of just put into whichever one was in your district. So
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, was that something? So, you said you kind of figured you were going that way anyway. So, art was something that, like, you were already always passionate about, or?
Yeah, and I always grew up like drawing and things like that. And it's like one of the first memories I have is just like drawing with some crayons in the corner of the living room, you know? And I was always like pretty naturally good at drawing. So I figured I was probably, and I was like, I loved it. So, and I still love it, obviously. And it's been something like when I got to college eventually, I kind of just wanted, like I went to a liberal arts college, but one that had a good art program, but I wanted to like explore my options a little bit just in case like art wasn't the thing I wanted to do. At least I would have other options, but eventually I settled on art anyway. But yeah, it was always something that I always went back to, even if I was working on something else or studying something else. It was always like that. I don't want to say fallback because I don't really consider it a fallback, but always, yeah, something I just naturally return to and still really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it ever, I mean, was there ever any friction about that, like with your family, with your parents?
Not really. I mean, my mom was always super supportive because she actually studied art a little bit in college. My dad and my sister like don't quite understand it, and I think that's kind of normal. So getting them more into the realm of the art world and or even the craft world, when I'm in now, it's like they're trying to get a better understanding of it, but they were always super supportive, even though they didn't quite understand how or why I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I feel pretty fortunate about that too. Yeah.
So, undergrad, what'd you end up graduating with?
I got a degree in technically interdisciplinary, so it's like a choose your own major kind of thing, but I focused on sculpture and drawing. Those were my 2 like main areas. Um, But the nice thing about my college was we had a Wingate artist in residence program. So they'd bring in artists every semester to teach a class and to sort of work on their own work. And it was through that program that I was able to meet Vivian Beer, who I ended up later on working for on several occasions. And she does metal furniture, steel furniture, in which I didn't, before then, I didn't really know was like a thing. So she just kind of like blew my mind. And like TIG, like I remember TIG welding for the first time in her class. Like I just like it, like something just clicked in my brain. I was like, this is it. Like this is like what I'm supposed to do. So I ended up for my thesis project was all furniture pieces. Yeah.
Okay. Was college the first time you had experience with the sculptural piece of art?
Yeah. Like I said, I did like maybe a little bit of like clay work and little wood sculpture in high school, but it was really just kind of, just here's a chisel and just like hack at this piece of wood for a little while. It wasn't anything like significant.
Right.
But yeah, the program I went through had a really great metal shop and wood shop. And at the time they had instructors who had been there for years and years. So they really sort of made those shops their own and had a pretty set curriculum in place. So I was able to take some woodworking classes while I was there and a couple metalworking classes. And yeah, I feel like I was in a sculpture program, so like I made some sculptures here and there, and I had really great professors who really encouraged me to pursue it. I just didn't really feel like an emotional connection to it. Like I loved making stuff with my hands, and by like doing all the conceptual art stuff and maybe just non-functional work was something I wasn't immediately drawn to. So it wasn't until I took Vivian's class ultimately, but before then I had taken a woodworking class based on furniture. It's like I loved furniture, but wood wasn't necessarily like that connection point, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think it is for you with when it's furniture, like the metal versus wood?
I'm not sure exactly because I as of late I've been really going back and forth between the two. So it seems like now the woodworking really just informs my practice a lot more, and I have a better understanding of how these furniture pieces are built. And it's really like just kind of like a weird thing to say as a woodworker, but it's like it's a relaxing thing for me sometimes. And like that's not necessarily the case with most woodworking practices, especially if you got like a complicated glue up,
Right.
I think like because again, like just TIG welding for the first time, and it just like I immediately took to it, and it just like felt so much more natural to me than woodworking did. So I guess I don't know if that quite answered the question, but yeah. But they're just like so different, but also so similar too. And
yeah, I mean it's. I would say the biggest difference is just like material movement and understanding, just I guess the structure of the material itself. Which I had to take a whole like material science class in college. I went for manufacturing technology, and that still goes over my head, but it's like enough kind of stuck that it's like on a very basic level I understand the difference of like cellular structure type stuff of
yeah, it's funny. I'm teaching a woodworking class or furniture class right now, and I keep telling students, it's like, this is a lot of information to take in. And it's like, I remember exactly being in that same spot, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
It's like wood moves this way, and you need to make joinery accordingly, and you have to cut stuff this way, but not this way. And there's an order of operations. And it's just like, whoa, way too much. So I can commiserate with them a little bit.
Yeah. As part of your, I mean, when you did your thesis, and you did furniture pieces, were they all metal furniture pieces?
So it was a mixture of steel and wood.
Okay.
Because at the time, and like up until I did a residency in Tennessee, like I thought I had like there needed to be some connection between the two materials. So I was still sort of figuring out like my place in the furniture world, right? I was just emerging. I'm just into furniture, and I'm just like, well, I got to know all this stuff about woodworking, but I'm also a metal worker. So there must be a way I can like bring those two things together in a cohesive way. So yeah, for the thesis, it was all just like these wood and steel pieces.
When you're when you're going through that process, did you have any background as far as like design of furniture pieces?
Not really, no. Yeah, I mean, like my teacher sort of instilled that we need to have sort of like a bit of a design sense, I guess, and like really incorporating your own style and aesthetics into the pieces that we're creating. But I wouldn't say I had like a furniture history course or like the history of furniture design over the years or anything like that. So it's all just, as of late, it's all just like me researching different periods of furniture and learning about them. And it's just part of my research now, more so than it was before. And I wouldn't say I'm like a designer by any means. I'm like, my work now is just like copying old stuff. So
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But okay, so I really want to venture into I've been like holding myself back, but I have to venture into this. Like, you make steel look like wood. How did that come about?
So I was doing a residency in Tennessee at the Appalachian Center for Craft. So at the time it was as long as a 3-year residency. It's since been shortened to 2 years. So I was in the middle of my first year. I had just like gotten out of grad school. My work was still like this combination of wood and steel. And I wasn't really like, I didn't really have a direction for the work. And I was getting, at the time I was getting kind of frustrated with it because it wasn't really the type of work that I wanted to produce, but I didn't really know what else to do. And then eventually I just came on the idea, and it was an idea I had while in grad school, but just didn't feel confident enough to actually fall through with it. I was like, well, I've always wanted to do these steel pieces that were essentially reproductions of older works. So sort of like a trompe l'oeil type thing. And I was just like, well, I guess now's the time to do it. Yeah. So that's sort of been the basis of my work for the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years now. Yeah. And yeah, so it's sort of like just become this culmination of everything that I've learned throughout all my schools and work and all that. And yeah, and it's been sort of like a big experiment for the past 4 years. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would imagine there was a good amount at least of experimentation to be able to get the steel to, in looks anyways, mimic wood.
Yeah.
Like, how long was that process and going through all of that?
Well, the first piece I made was called Lady Beefcake. It's this white table, and at the time I was really like, I wanted to figure out how to do these cabriole legs. That was like the main goal of that table. And I was just like, well, I know how to hammer steel, and I know how to weld it. So I'm like, I guess I could figure out a way how to make these cabriole legs. And then eventually I did. So that was just kind of a big experiment. And since then it's just been sort of one experiment after the other. So like I wanted to figure out how to do image transfers on metals. That took like a little bit of research, some on YouTube, just some on the fly. So I figured out how to do that and try to get images so I can recreate a specific chair for that piece. It's sort of just been like one thing after another. And then making them look like antiques, so doing like that rust finish on them was really key too. And like from afar, they do look like they're wood pieces, but if you really look close up, like that rust is like the key factor in letting someone know that they're made of steel. Yeah.
Hey makers, I want to tell you a little bit about today's episode's sponsor, Athena Outfitters. So when I'm in the market for a new pair of work boots, I do a ton of research, make sure I'm getting something that's going to fit right and going to last. Well, Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that has a tons of experience with footwear. They've taken the time to select the very best shoes and boots made by each of the most reliable footwear brands. And when I shop at Athena Outfitters site, it saves me time and energy because I trust that they found the best shoes for every job and activity. Plus bonus, you can shop online. So next time you need new work boots or some other type of high performance shoe, check out AthenaOutfitters.com, gear with grit. And Athena is ATHENA, and then outfitters.com. You can also get a special discount at checkout by using the coupon code MM, that's capital M 15 for 15% off any purchase, just because you're a listener of the podcast. All right, let's hop back into the episode. What's your experience watching somebody discover that your piece is made out of metal?
It's pretty funny sometimes, actually. I had one person come in, and it was during my time at the craft center, and he was giving an artist talk or something, just kind of working around the studios and visiting studios and stuff. And I had just finished this one chair I was working on. And he was a metal worker too, so this is also kind of a funny thing. And he was just like, wow, this is a really great piece. Like, do you have the metal one already? I was just like, it's right there. He was just like, oh, I had no idea. I had to like knock on it, and I was like, yeah, this is the steel one. He's just like, whoa. So like, stuff like that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah. I imagine it would be fun to just like have that piece on display somewhere where, you know, people interact with it very frequently and just sit back and watch the reactions of people. I mean, I enjoy the similar thing with my resin and wood bowls because I intentionally make them look more like glass, and or ceramics. And then when people like pick it up and they really start to like look at it, and then, you know, you go, yeah, it's wood, and the expressions they get, it's fun to kind of have.
Yeah. And it's really like something clicks in their heads too. It's just like, oh, I like had one like idea about this material, but now seeing this and how it could look this way, and it's just like, whoa, I never thought about thinking about this material in this way before. So sort of that realization is really satisfying too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, now you're teaching. How do you kind of manage like your own practice and teaching?
Well, with COVID and all that, it's been pretty difficult as of late. I usually try to just like, I never used to be like a planner, and like, but I physically bought a planner so I can write everything down. I give myself like little to-do lists so I can check everything off. So like, I've tried to just be as organized as I can possibly be. And I usually just work on my stuff over the weekends, or just when I have like a day off or something, and that's like me time, and then do all of my schoolwork during the rest of the week. Yeah. So, but with COVID and all that, I've had to figure out how to put sculpture classes online, which is just like, what? How does that work?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been like, I have good days and bad, but I get through it. Yeah.
Are you guys back in person now then?
Yeah, my furniture class is in person, and I have a survey sculpture class, which is like an introductory level, and that's hybrid. So they get to come in when they want to, but most of the instruction is online. So if they need to stay home, they can. So yeah, so the furniture class is the one I've really been focusing on lately.
Yeah, I definitely I really don't envy any teacher at all right now.
You get paid for, that's the thing. Especially K through 12 teachers, but yeah.
So no teacher right now, I think, is in like a super great spot, but especially I've had a few of you on as guests on the podcast and who teach this very like physical, you know, you have to be like, it's almost like, how do you teach that virtually? Students don't have those tools at home. So
right. Yeah. And it's hard because like some things you need to like physically show someone how to do, and it's like it's like pretty impossible to do it online. So yeah, having those workarounds and making projects like accessible for at-home instruction has just been like like major challenge. And like of course some things get like lost in the teaching, but you know, hopefully they learn other things instead in place of that. Yeah.
Was teaching ever on your radar to start with, as far as what you would end up going kind of into?
Well, I always wanted it as an option because I was always kind of on the fence about teaching. And I'm actually probably skipping ahead. I'm actually leaving this job as of April. But like it was a main reason why, well, not a main reason, but one of the reasons why I decided to go to grad school because I wanted it to at least be an option for me in case like studio work didn't work out. And I was actually recommended for this job. So I actually got kind of lucky. They were looking to, like, guy I was replacing got a job as the department head, and they were looking for someone just to fill in that spot until they can hire on someone full time. So I just, you know, kind of lucked into it. But I really enjoy a lot of aspects of teaching. I just think academia itself is not quite for me, at least not at this time. Maybe a few years down the line, maybe, but.
So, okay, so what are you doing in April?
Well, I'm still figuring that out. I've been applying to residencies and other sort of other jobs that maybe don't quite have as much responsibility as a full-time teaching job. So yeah, everything's just kind of up in the air at this point. I'm really hoping to just focus on my work for a bit longer and hopefully get maybe a studio practice going where I can just bang out some work and, you know, keep showing and hopefully sell some stuff too. That'd be nice.
Right. Yeah. That's always a good thing to happen. When it comes to like studio work, I guess what would you say like is your dream there? Is it you create and someone, you know, loves a piece, buys it, or is it commission work? Like what's the dream?
Yeah, I would love for just have like a benefactor who just loves my work and just like, keep making stuff. I'm like, yes, okay. I've done commission works before, and it's not my favorite thing to do because working with clients can be difficult. But if it comes down to that too, if they like really like a particular piece and just want me to remake that piece, like I've done that before, and that's usually pretty satisfying. So. But in an ideal situation, I'd love to just like make some work and have people love it and want to buy it. So,
When you went to school, do they help teach you how to turn studio work into like a living?
Not really. Like we sort of go through classes like here's how you build a resume and like you can practice writing grants and or grant applications and cover letters and things like that. But I feel like the studio practice thing doesn't really get taught all that much. And it was called like a professional practices. I forget the actual term for the course in grad school, but it was like all the disciplines combined into that class. So you had like jewelers and ceramics and furniture people. So it's like that kind of thing. It's like really hard to discuss how to come up with a studio practice because we're all different.
Right.
Even from furniture maker to furniture maker, it's like my practice is different from my fellow grad students, right? So like if I do the wood and metal and someone does solely wood or someone does only like steam bending or vacuum forming and things like that. So it's all just sort of dependent on the needs of that particular person, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I've often, you know, wondered why like business classes aren't part of like an art program.
They really should be. It's like, I'm looking up to have a tax guy, but I'm like, I have no clue about any of that. But I would love to be able to understand that more, or even just like, here's how you set up a Roth IRA and why this is a good thing to do when you're younger. You know, it's like, I didn't have any kind of clue about any of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I live in a university town, and my university just so happens to have like an art entrepreneurship
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
certificate program. I haven't taken it yet. I'm still kind of like, I think I can figure it out just via Google.
Yeah.
But but it is one of those things of like, even just that fact of like, oh, they've recognized it enough to be like a certificate program after the fact.
Yeah.
Still, it would be great if like they sprinkled in some business classes.
Yeah, it really would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that more programs don't do that. 'Cause it really can be helpful. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what would you say you struggle with the most, like when it comes to the idea of like a studio practice?
really, for me, I think it's just settling on a location because I've just been
Mm,
moving around so much, and I love different parts of different areas. So it's just like finding like where your audience is, right? So it's like Mississippi doesn't really have much of a art scene here.
mhm.
So selling work and showing work has been like really minimal at this point. But I had like great work and like a great showing record in Tennessee. And it's like I never knew that there was an art scene there outside of like
Right.
Nashville, really. So really just finding the right audience and location is probably the hardest thing at this point. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's, personally, I've always thought like where I need to sell my stuff is either coasts, is I feel like that's really kind of where arts thrive and you can sell stuff.
yeah.
But entering into that scene from a location of the Midwest is difficult,
Yeah. Yeah.
to say the least. It's hard to like, it's like even finding showings going on or calls for artists or all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's like another job in and of itself, just like looking for those opportunities. Like my weekends these days have just been like paperwork and just like looking on the internet and seeing what shows I'm like remotely like applicable for. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah. Mhm.
So you said you showed some and had success in Tennessee. Where else have you had your work shown?
I've had my work shown in Philadelphia at the Center for Art and Wood. I
Mm-hmm.
recently had a show in Memphis at the Metal Museum, my first solo show, so it was really exciting. And my work is actually back in Tennessee at the Craft Center. I had a little solo show there. I was able to show at ICFF, the International
Mm-hmm.
Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York, a couple of times through my school and also through the Furniture Society. A couple other places here and there too. And Houston Center for Contemporary Craft was a recent one. Houston's been really great in terms of an art scene there too. Yeah.
How do you find out about these opportunities?
Well, a lot of them are just like through like call for entry or like sort of those online platforms
Mm-hmm.
that have all those postings. I have been reached out to a couple of times. So Houston was a good example for that. The curator there actually juried a show I was in Tennessee and like loved my work and just like remembered me from that. Like making connections that way is like a great way to find opportunities too. Um, and yeah, it's like usually like when I'm talking to my students about it, usually it's that first one that's probably the hardest to get. Once you have that first one, it starts to get a little bit easier because your work starts to become a little bit more known by others,
Mm-hmm.
and your showing record grows too. So, yeah.
So here's probably my biggest question: how do you have enough pieces to put into shows?
Well, I didn't for a long time. And that's like another like organizing thing. Like I'll
Right.
apply to like 4 or 5 different shows, and I'm like, well, I applied to this show with those pieces, and I have to apply to this one with these pieces. And that's just, I feel like that comes with time, really. So I've been working on this body of work for 4 years. It started out with just the one piece.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just been kind of growing from then on out. Yeah.
Are your pieces generally always somewhere, or have you had the time where it's like they're all in your living space with you?
Well, recently, yes, I did have them all like back together. It was like a little reunion, but now some of them are off at that solo show, and I still have a couple here and there. So there's always like at least 1 or 2 hanging out, and then a couple of them are elsewhere and over there. Yeah. Um,
How many pieces do you have in total?
Of that body of work or just like all
Yeah.
the work?
Yeah.
I think I have about maybe 15 of the current body of work. I still have most of my grad school pieces. That's maybe about 30 pieces total, maybe a little more.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been able through these shows to then sell some of the pieces while they're
Yeah.
at show?
Yeah. So through that one show I did in Tennessee where the juror was from Houston. So that got like a best in show award or something. And then someone who saw that show bought it. So I was like really fortunate about that. Then I had one other person buy one of my pieces, but it just happened to be like a friend I'd had and like really loved the piece. Then I also made these like stools at one point that went into another show, and someone had saw the show, and like I had to commission a bunch of these. That was like my one commission I did. I had to make a whole bunch more of those stools. So yeah, I think like now, like again, it all sort of depends on like where the show is and the audience that that show is getting. But yeah.
What was your I want to do a little compare and contrast. What were your expectations of
Mm-hmm.
what a show would be like when you had your first show?
I'm trying to think what my first show was. I think it was like maybe a grad school show. Because I had gone to museums and galleries and stuff. So I feel like I like the white walls and like everything's looking all nice and pretty, and like that was pretty much what I was expecting. But then there's other shows that are like more thematic. So I never really had like concepts of that before, or like gallery spaces. I had like some work shown in a gallery where the walls were like not really carpeted, but they had like fabric on them, and I was just like, this is kind of odd. So like putting like hanging works up on those walls was difficult. And yeah, I feel like there's like that nervous energy that goes into going into your first show because you're like, ooh, this can be like a nice opportunity. And like shipping work for the first time is like really nerve wracking, especially if you have like larger furniture pieces. You're just like, oh, is it gonna make it there? You know,
Right.
in the box. So I feel like, and again, I feel like the New Yorker comes out and it's like, just waiting. But yeah, I feel like just that nervous energy going into it and then realizing that like this is just a hurdle and like it'll be okay. And like the other ones get easier from then on out. Yeah.
Did you go in with any expectation of like you're gonna get that probably what I would say now miracle person to come like buy every piece? Like,
I mean, like that's always like the hope that runs through my mind. Yeah. But I feel like it's like a hope for the best, but expect the worst, or like plan for the worst. You're just like, oh well, you know, if I just show and no one bothers to look at it, then you know, at least I can put a line on my resume, right? So I mean, yeah. But ideally, yeah, I'd love for someone to just buy the work, so I don't have to deal with it anymore.
That's right. Today's episode is brought to you by toolmomstore.com. Toolmom and Company is for all ages, genders. They have what you need for your one-stop tool-related merchandise of gifts and clothing. The products are fun, fashionable, one of a kind. In fact, I have two of the mugs. One has a circular saw with flames coming off of it. It says "Go Girl." Another one has the definition of a tool chick. Both of them are super awesome, and I have coffee out of them almost every morning. So check out toolmomstore.com or find them on Instagram at toolmombonnie. You can receive an extra 20% off at checkout by using the code MAKERMOM.
Yeah.
After about the, fifth time of moving a piece, it kind of is like, I'm really somebody could buy this.
It gets old real quick.
Yeah.
Like one of the pieces I just made is like that's a big chest piece and it's like 300 pounds. I'm just like, Like, I really don't want to move this anymore.
Right.
So hopefully someone buys that one.
I know that's always been my thing when people ask me, oh, do you do like shows and stuff? And it's like I did for the first couple of years, and honestly, I'm like, after you've moved a single piece of furniture that many times, like you're just kind of, I'm done. Like, I'll find a pretty place for it in my house.
Yeah. With that too, is like shows aren't for everybody. It's like,
No.
I'm so used to moving my stuff around, so like I usually just drive it, and if it's close enough.
Right.
But like craft show is like totally different than like a gallery show. And craft show is like, nope, no, thank you. I'm just that's way too much work and so much overhead in terms of money. It's like the stress level there is also just
yes.
Yeah. But some people love it. Like they make their livings doing craft shows, and
right.
Go for it. Yeah.
And and it depends on your audience though too, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like I did enough. Like I did like 3-ish craft shows or like pop-up type things, and that was enough just to say like, yeah, my ideal audience who can afford my prices is not walking into something like this.
Yes, exactly.
So that's not the space for me, and it's fine to learn that, but maybe if it's like there's a chance of my ideal audience seeing it, I'm willing to move it maybe a few more times. But
sure.
So you've been working on this body of work for, you said 4 years, I think.
About that,
yeah. How do you see it? I mean, are you you feel like you hit your rhythm, or do you see it still like morphing and changing?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of both, I guess. Like I'm really happy and satisfied with this body of work, but it's always evolving in one way or another. So like lately I've been focusing more on like decorative techniques, or like the image transfer stuff, and like a really most industry right now is like seeing how I can make steel into like sort of like a textile medium. So like the last piece I made was a seat that it was a corner chair, and the seat was woven out of spun steel wool. And that was just like a big experiment too. So I was just wondering if I could even do this for one, and just seeing how it actually worked. And it worked out fairly well. So I'm kind of interested in seeing what more I can do in terms of that line of thinking about material and steel specifically, but other metals too. Yeah.
Where do you find most of your inspiration?
I usually, it sort of comes from a lot of different places, but I do like a lot of online research of like different furniture pieces, and I go on like all these auction websites, and just like if I'm in the middle of a piece, I need to figure out dimensions. Like auction websites are great for that. But sometimes I'll be like watching a movie, and there's like a captain's chair in the shot, and I'm just like, oh, that's going to be my next piece, So sometimes it kind of happens like haphazardly like that. And I buy like a lot of furniture books too, like catalog type things, or just like the history of like all furniture or whatever,
Right.
So I tend to just like piece through these types of books, and something just happens to catch my eye, or just like, oh, this is going to be an interesting thing. And this is sort of like an interesting challenge to try to figure out how to make in steel, and I sort of gravitate towards that. Yeah.
How do you, do you ever find yourself in like a creative dry spot?
Like now, yes. I think it's just like a lot of things though. It's like I'm about to move, and I don't know where I'm going next, so I don't really want to start anything brand new right now. And it's like that thing where like I haven't actually found a piece that I'm like dying to try to figure out how to make. So I think, yes, I get through like dry patches, and there's like long periods where I'm not really working on anything, but I'm just kind of like looking through all these different pieces of material to figure out like what my next step is. Yeah.
Are there any like go-to activities you do that help kind of get you in the right frame of mind?
Well, actually, like, this is going to sound really kind of mundane, but like I tend to like have a space in any room that's just blank, and I can just like stare at a blank wall and it just let my mind just kind of wander.
Mhm.
So it's just like if I'm looking at an uncluttered thing, then hopefully my mind can become uncluttered. And it's actually pretty helpful.
Mhm.
And sometimes just like writing different words down, or like what things I want to achieve with the body of work, or things I just want to further explore. Like sometimes that happens too. Not really a lot of like sketching these days, but mostly just like writing sentences down or phrases that
Mhm.
I find interesting. Yeah, just like little bits and pieces of idea generating, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't think that necessarily sounds mundane. I tend to be either go for a drive or go for a
Oh yeah.
walk.
Mhm.
Or sometimes just in the shower. I feel like I need to like have one of those like waterproof like
Oh,
pens
so
or
paper,
like
yeah.
crayons or whatever so I can just like write all over the shower wall.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, walks are great too. I go for walks all the time. I get a big fluffy dog at home, so he needs to go out. And that's a
Yeah.
good excuse to, escape
Yeah,
mind a little bit. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Um, do you sketch up your work in any way before you like start working on it?
It's like it depends on the piece, really. So sometimes, like what I usually do is I find images that are close to the like chair or something that I want to make, and I'll pull measurements from it, and then sort of natural. Like I'll have to draw them up full scale sometimes just to get like more accurate measurements or ideas of proportion and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but usually if I'm just like doing little sketches, it's more just like as a way to remember, like, oh, this is the
Mm-hmm.
thought I had at this point. I don't do like any kind of like formal sketching at this point, I guess. But or yeah, so it's really just pulling a bunch of images off and picking out measurements from there. And a lot of the like doing the metal work is a lot of it's just like kind of sketching in space. So like
Right.
if I'm bending a piece of metal and the shape doesn't look right, then I just like recut it and re-weld it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
So, I mean, going through a sculptural program, I feel like you probably had a good mix, I would say, of gender wise representation in class. Or,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, Now, with some of your teaching or the places you've done residency in, do you
Mhm.
feel like there's still a pretty good mix of representation?
Yeah, I think actually. I remember being in Tennessee doing that residency. I had issues with like we would have like local events set up for like local art events.
Mm-hmm.
I had people come visit my studio, and they like would be, oh, who does all your welding? I was like, it's me. My welder's right over there. You can see it.
Right.
But I feel like in terms of my teaching, in terms of other places I've been to, I feel like the gender mix and even the like the race identifications here has been um, really great too. Like particularly in Mississippi, it's like our population is half black, so we get a lot of black students or people of color in here, and it's like really great to see that.
Yeah.
And it's like something that like makes sense like before it got here, but I didn't really realize that would be the case. So it's really kind of refreshing to see that. Um, that isn't to say we don't get like good old boys in here either who are just like, oh, but my students are pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, what about I guess in your the other places you've studied,
Mhm.
what was kind of the mix ethnicity wise?
So both my undergrad and grad school were mostly white.
Mm-hmm.
In San Diego, we did get more of a Mexican influence because Tijuana is just right over the
Yeah.
border. But it was still predominantly white. So it wasn't really until I got to here in Mississippi where I really saw other people of color. Like Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
especially where we were in Tennessee, it was like all white,
Hmm.
um, which was unfortunate, but it's a matter of location. Um, Gender-wise, it's been a pretty good mix, and those things sort of happen in waves too. So you get periods where it's mostly men, and sometimes it's mostly women, and sometimes there's a good mix going on.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in grad school, I was the only girl in the program for a little while, so that was kind of interesting. And I remember taking a class at Penland. It was a boat building class in Penland School of Craft,
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only girl in the class out of like 10 people or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't really think about it before getting into woodworking or metalworking, but it sort of became more like I became more aware of it as I started working more in both the woodworking and metalworking fields. I would argue that it's actually worse in the metalworking field
Mm-hmm.
in terms of gender equality, gender representation, things like that. And I try to be a part of organizations that are really striving to give women and people of color more representation in those fields. And that's something I really push in my teaching too, is to be cognizant of that wherever you go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would maybe argue a little bit about as far as like location necessarily driving the mix of student population, just because I mean, obviously people travel to go to school.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's just maybe it's that opportunity isn't known unless you're local to that area.
Yeah, and it really boils down to, well, my opinion, it boils down to like an early education experience.
Yeah.
Like we get a lot of students here who like had no idea about art before taking their first art class, or like barely even picked up a pencil and sketched in a piece of notebook paper, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just not thought of as something that's like a marketable field. It's like not like, because here it's like football and all this other stuff is
Mm-hmm.
main money maker. So the priority is more on that than it is on the arts. And I feel like it's most important in early education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, where you're located at, like, I mean, is it an art program you're teaching in, or are people taking it on like an industry level type stuff?
It's an art program. So they can get their BFA, and I think it's just like a general fine art BFA degree.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can get a specialization in sculpture. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time together, so I want to make sure that people have a chance to, check you out online and see your work. So where can they find you at?
My website is sophieglenn.com, and my Instagram handle is at arcburn_furniture. And I'm sort of on Facebook, but usually everything I put on Instagram goes on Facebook. But you can find me on Facebook too.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, I was looking forward to this. So thank you for thinking of me. Appreciate
it. Yeah. Okay, so again, that was Sophie Glenn, and as always, I will include the links on how you can follow along with her in the show notes for today's episode. So you can find those in the description for whatever podcast app you're listening to, and if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, just check out the description down below. You can also find the show notes over at freemanfurnishings.com/podcast. So check that out. I want to give a big shout out and thanks again. It's been a while to mention that the music for the Wonder Women podcast was produced and sung and made by Mary Lou of Made by Mary Lou. So if you aren't currently following her over on Instagram or YouTube, please do so. She is absolutely fascinating and wonderful and talented. So go do that. All right, so make sure that you're following along with the podcast. Remember, the name has recently changed. So if you want to follow along over on Instagram, that's at Wonder Women Pod, because believe it or not, Wonder Women Podcast was already taken. So Wonder Women Pod on Instagram. And that's kind of where all the goodies live and where I'll announce the week's guests for both Wednesday and Friday episodes. So go check that out. Head on over to Patreon. That's patreon.com/. That's still unfortunately under Maker Mom Podcast. I'm working on getting that changed. But check that out. Or if you want to just get a Wonder Women podcast t-shirt or coffee mug or face mask or pretty much probably any other sort of merchandise with the Wonder Women podcast logo on it, you can hit me up with a message. Also, it's linked over on Instagram. Again, that Wonder Women pod on Instagram, so you can find it there too. When I am not making podcasts, you can find me making furniture and home decor at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings pretty much across all of the social media. I'm active on a daily basis on Instagram and TikTok, so that's where you can see, what's the current project going on. Generally involves some level of either power carving or adding texture or some kind of crazy color, along with shenanigans such as Shop Dance Tuesday. So you can go check that out there. Let me know you found me through the podcast. I always enjoy hearing that. All right, it is Wednesday. I hope you all are having a fantastic week so far and are ready to rock out the rest of the week. And I will see you all on Friday with a brand new episode.